Right, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our fourth annual Future MDs in STEM summer program. And also thank you to everyone that's turned their cameras on. This is totally optional, it's not required, and it's only if you're comfortable, but it's so lovely to get to see some of your beautiful faces. So my name is Davina. I'm the founder here. Ahmad, if you want to give everyone a wave, Ahmad is our executive director, and Rourke is one of our executive interns that will be joining us today. We'll be here to answer some questions that you have about the session and just to kind of help things run. So we also have our guest speaker here today. His name is Dr. Singh, and we will introduce him in just a second. But before we get started with our guest speaker segment for today, I just wanted to share a couple of helpful reminders with everybody. So first off, welcome to our fourth annual summer program. We're so excited to have all of you here with us today. These are just a couple of reminders before we go into our guest speaker shadowing segment and before we transition into our workshop. Just a reminder that when our guest speaker is talking or if one of our program coordinators are talking, we are not. So please make sure you remain on mute unless we have specifically asked for your participation or if you're asking a question, if it's in that dedicated time. And if you want to ask a question, you are more than welcome to either use the chat or you can raise your hand virtually. There's a button on Zoom that will let you do that. And we'll call on you in the order that Zoom gives us. It's usually whoever raises their hand first appears first on our screen, and we'll call on you. And then just a reminder to not spam the chat, just so if anyone's asking questions or answering questions, it doesn't get lost. And if you have any questions, you can use the chat to private message us and we will answer them as the session goes on. Okay, so I will hand it over to Dr. Singh now, who will be talking to us about his profession and his journey into medicine. And then please make sure you remain muted and save your questions for the end.
Great, thank you, Davina, and good evening to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You guys can hear me okay? Give me a nod. All right, great, thanks. All right, I'm gonna try to share my screen. Let me know if that works. How's that? Okay, all right, so I'm going to give a quick overview on who I am and what I do, and then just a small little presentation on something that I like to talk about, which is exercise and fitness and strength, core strengthening. But I'll keep it brief, and then I want to give you guys time to ask me some questions. I do have to jump off around 5:50 Eastern, so I will get to it right away. All righty. All right, so my name is Ricky Singh. I live here in New York City in Manhattan. I work at Weill Cornell Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. I practice physiatry, also known as physical medicine and rehabilitation, and also subspecialty certifications in both pain medicine and sports medicine. You know, in my department of rehab medicine, we have a faculty group of about 27 faculty. When I got here in 2011, there was only 4 of us. Serve as vice chair of the department, basically mentoring faculty, building the practice, helping with education and things like that. So what is physiatry? So physiatry comes from the Greek words for 2 words for physical and healing. And basically this specialty really gained popularity after World War I and World War II, when many injured soldiers and veterans were returning from amputees, from traumatic brain injuries, from PTSD. And that's kind of where rehabilitation medicine really gained some popularity. But over the last 20 or 30 years, we really expanded in our sub-specialization, which could be sports medicine or pain medicine, pediatrics, children suffering from cerebral palsy and things like that, um, neuro rehab, strokes, and brain specialty to be part of. We used to consider ourselves kind of non-operative orthopedics or non-operative neurosurgery, but really there's so many things you can do through a physiatry background. So what are we? We are physicians. We're M.D.s and D.os. Often we get confused for either psychiatrists, because the words are relatively similar, or physical therapists. But we work very, very closely with many different members of the treatment team. And I think that's what the beauty of our specialty is, that we're very, very collaborative. We don't really try to compete with other physicians. We really work in a group multidisciplinary environment. The goal of our specialty is really just to improve function. So when patients get injured, whether it's back pain or an ACL tear or whatever, or they have a stroke or they have a spinal cord injury, our job is to get them back to function. And that is basically what our mission statement is. The training with physiatry is after 4 years of medical school. The residency program is also 4 years, which includes 1 year of an internship and then 3 years of specialty training. And then, like I mentioned, there's many, many different fellowships that one can pursue after a physical medicine and rehabilitation residency. And some of those include hospice, neuro rehab, pain, pediatrics, spinal cord, sports medicine, just to name some of the subspecialty fellowships after residency. As I mentioned earlier, the goal of physiatry is to improve patients' function and quality of life. We are non-operative. We do some small micro procedures. Conditions that we treat in physiatry, like I mentioned earlier, is back and neck pain, osteoporosis, rehabilitation, undergone a CABG procedure or even a heart transplant. Oftentimes we will see that for cardiopulmonary rehabilitation. Cancer rehab is also gaining popularity. A lot of patients as we get older are getting diagnosed with various cancers. And the rehabilitation process, again, to keep their muscles strong, to keep their tendons loose, has become a tremendous focus in our specialty. So I want to talk to you just about a quick case and then talk about some of the treatment options that we employ. So this is a 44-year-old electrician who was lifting a chandelier, felt lower back pain, no pain going into the legs. The neuro exam was normal, meaning strength was normal, reflexes were normal, bowel and bladder was normal. So the most important thing to think about is what is causing the pain. So figuring out the etiology of the pain generator is going to help you focus the treatment. So in the back, when someone says I have back pain, there's so many things that could cause pain. It could be the bone, like the periosteum. It could be the disc. It could be the facet joint, sacroiliac joint, ligaments, muscles. A whole host of things that can cause similar pain. And our job is to go through the history, go through the physical examination, maybe get some imaging, to get the specific diagnosis, which is going to yield a pain coming from the disc. There was no herniation, so nothing bulged. That was back pain. And this is a common thing that I see a lot in my clinic. So I wanted to kind of talk to you briefly about two different strategies in creating core strength. So we kind of talk about six-pack abs, right? Everybody knows what a six-pack is, and we all opine and desire to get six-pack. So this lecture was kind of a way to introduce what the six-pack is, how to get those muscles stronger, and what would help the most. Is it strengthening? Is it diet? Is it exercise? So we'll briefly touch on that. So the six-pack is basically this muscle in front of you that you can see under the pecs, called your rectus abdominis. Now, everyone has a six-pack. Sometimes it's just a matter of showcasing it, right? There's usually a layer of adipose tissue covering it. So the goal is to remove that layer so you can show off your six-pack. And what does a six-pack do? Basically, it originates on the underside of your ribs and inserts down here in your pubic symphysis, which is kind of in your pelvis area. And the function of the rectus abdominis is to flex the spine. So you can imagine like a sit-up or like a crunch. And that's probably why the sit-up became so popular, because of the function of the rectus abdominis is to flex the spine. The sit-up was probably the best way to build the abs. What we have seen over the years is that this is actually a terrible exercise for core strengthening, because when you flex the spine using your rectus abdominis or your core muscle, you're actually putting a lot of stress on the disc. And if you think about doing sit-ups as a way to lose weight, also not super efficient. If you do the math here, 20 to 30 proper sit-ups in a minute, you burn about 4 to 5 calories for every minute of sit-ups. If we assume that 1 pound is equal to 3,500 calories, it takes 26,000. There's better ways to avoid stress on your disc. Now, this was a study done in the 60s. Dr. Nachemson, he actually took medical students and he put a little wire into their discs and checked different pressures at different positions. So if you look at the third column of the gentleman standing, of the model standing, we'll call this 100% of pressure in the disc. And when you're lying down on your back, it's about 25%. If you lie on your side, it's 75% of that. Or most of us do when we're studying. We're sitting in a chair, we're leaning forward, we're working on the computer. If you look at that last column, it's almost 2 to 3 times the stress on your disc. And this is what you emulate and mimic when you're doing a sit-up or a crunch. So we really want to avoid that. So that's the diagram right up there, sitting and leaning forward. But the core is not just the six-pack. It's not just the rectus abdominis muscle. There are other muscles in the core that help you create core strength, which again, take the pressure off the disc to alleviate that person's pain that I presented in the case. So some of these other muscles include the external obliques. The external obliques wrap around the waist like this, and their function is to laterally bend when you fire them on an their of the trunk. But the most important muscle that we don't talk about a lot is called the transverse abdominis muscle. And this is the deep, deep core muscle. We call it nature's waist belt. And the reason we call it that is because this muscle is involved in transmitting forces from your lower body to your upper body. So imagine you are going to throw a ball like a baseball pitcher. And studies have been done where the rectus abdominis, the transverse abdominis actually fire first, and then your arm goes into a swinging motion. Quads, then your hip flexors go into kicking that soccer ball. So this muscle is super important in preparing the body for activity. Now, if we look at the sit-ups and compare which is the second column, is very low activation with sit-ups. So just by this diagram alone, you can see that sit-ups is not really great exercise. Yes, aesthetically, you're probably working the rectus abdominis, but if you really want to get true core strength, you're not hitting it unless the transverse abdominis gets activated. Same thing here. This muscle also activates rectus abdominis more than the transverse abdominis, which is in the yellow bar. Leg raises, you can imagine, good activation of the rectus abdominis again in the green, poor activation of the transverse, but also your psoas muscle. So your psoas muscle is a hip flexor. It originates in your lumbar spine and inserts into your hip bone. So when you're doing leg raises, your psoas muscle contracts and it compresses those discs even further. So also a very difficult exercise in someone who's plank. So if you look at the activation of the external obliques in the red, the internal obliques in the orange, and the transverse abdominis in the yellow, you can see tremendous activation doing both static side plank or dynamic side plank, because we're kind of going up and down. So I tell patients who have back pain, who I think it's coming from the disc, they need to start activating their core muscles to take the pressure off the disc, but how do you do it safely? So I give them these 3 exercises. The first is the curl up with one leg bent up. And the reason one leg bent up is because it takes the psoas muscle and deactivates it. The second is your bird dog muscle, the bird dog exercise. This muscle is essentially activating all of the extensor muscles of the spine. So extensor muscles are useful in resisting the forces of gravity. Also very important in the core. And the last one is side bridge, side plank, side support. They all mean the same thing, but a great way to activate those deep core muscles, take the pressure off the disc. So that's kind of an introduction to the muscles involved in core strengthening. Then the debate always comes, how do you exercise? What's the best way to exercise? Is it doing aerobic exercise? Is it doing anaerobic exercise? So this section of the talk, I kind of when it comes to weight loss. And remember, this talk was kind of based around how do you get a 6-pack? So the most important thing is diet, which I didn't touch in this discussion, but it's minimizing carbs, increasing protein, doing all those things that will not put you into ketosis or ketogenic diet, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, but basically turning what your body uses talk about how to exercise in terms of aerobics or anaerobic. So in my house, again, we have a debate. My wife likes to go on the treadmill, spend 60 to 90 minutes watching various things, mostly on Bravo and these shows, where I like to do something more efficient. I go and do 20 minutes of high intensity interval training, because I probably don't have the patience to spend 60 to 90 minutes in the gym. And also just based on the science and the data, that this type of exercise can lead to more fat loss than low to moderate exercise on the treadmill. So in the 1970s, the American College of Sports Medicine released their position statement on exercise. And they said to engage in aerobic activity 3 to 5 times a week, 20 to 60 minutes at 60 to 90% of maximal heart rate. And this is what we were saying to patients for years. Like, do a little bit of exercise 3 to 5 times a week, 60 to 90% of your maximal heart rate. So you're not really pushing yourself too hard. You're just cruising to get a little bit of a sweat. And that's kind of when jogging really became popular. So cardio became synonymous with aerobic exercise, which is low to moderate intensity. And this book by Chris McDougall, if you haven't read it, try to grab a copy. It's called Born to Run. I'm not sure I'm a believer if we were born to run. You know, we as mammals are the only mammal that jogs and does low to moderate intensity for exercise. So I actually argue that we're not born to jog. We are born to sprint. And if you think of other mammals in the animal kingdom, like the cheetahs and lions, they sprint, they hunt, and then they rest. They sprint, they hunt, and so if you compare low to moderate intensity, which is quote jogging, to high intensity, then you get something called HIIT, high intensity interval training. And basically that is, it's high and low intensities between anaerobic and aerobic. But the most important thing is that you're going past your aerobic threshold. And one way to kind of get a quick and dirty measurement of your heart rate is to calculate your max heart rate, which is 220 minus your age. So if you are 40 years old, which I don't think many of the attendees of this lecture are, I am 43. You take 220 minus your age, multiply that by 85%, you get your max, 85% of your max heart rate. And it's above this intensity where you hit your aerobic threshold and you've kicked into anaerobics. And I'll show you some diagrams on what that actually looks like. Just for someone who doesn't want to do the calculation on their own, take a look at your age on the left-hand column and your 85% of your max heart rate on the right. So if you're in 20s and 30s, you want to try to target 160 to 170 of your max heart rate when you are exercising for high intensity interval training. So what happens and what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic? Aerobic just means we use oxygen. Anaerobic means we don't use oxygen. Aerobic is more efficient because when you look at the Krebs cycle, and I'm not sure where everyone is in some of their medical training or pre-med courses, pyruvate converts in the Krebs cycle to produce energy. But anaerobic, when oxygen is not present, pyruvate forms lactic acid, right? It shifts out of the Krebs cycle to another cycle, and you form lactate. And why that's relevant is we've all done exercise before. We've all gotten a cramp or a stitch on the side in our trunk. And that's because of lactic acid buildup. Our body or you have to stop your activity. So one quick measure is something called the VO2 max. And basically this is on our body's ability to consume oxygen and utilize oxygen. It's our aerobic potential. It's measured in milliliters per kilogram per minute. So again, a quick and dirty way to estimate that is you look at your resting heart rate that's measured, your calculated heart rate max based on your age, and see what your VO2 max is. So again, if you're 30, your max heart rate is 220 minus your age of 190. If you're resting and if you look at this bar here on the right side, you can see 40s to 50s is most men, 35 to 43 is most women, all the way up to very high level athletes like Lance Armstrong, like Bjorn Dali. All these are cross country skiers and bicyclists. But you can see what their numbers look like because they have built a tremendous VO2 capacity and aerobic potential. Excuse me. You can also test VO2 max. You can do a graded exercise test where you're breathing in and breathing out. And once oxygen in equals oxygen out, that's your body's capability of utilizing oxygen. And that is your calculated VO2 max. And this is what that kind of looks like on a exercise graded test. On the bottom here on the x-axis, you see exercise intensity. As that increases, oxygen consumption also increases until you get to the point where you can no longer use or consume more oxygen. That is your VO2 max. So how do you improve VO2 max? Well, you remember the calculation, milliliters per kilogram per minute. So if your denominator goes down, your kilograms go down, your VO2 max will go up. You can do more cardio, which is biking or aerobic exercise. But what about high intensity interval training? How does that improve your lactic threshold and your VO2 max? Davina, you guys can still hear me okay?
Oh yeah, I think your Wi-Fi is cutting out a little bit.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay, let me see. Okay. Yeah, just let me know. Give me a I can see you in my chat window, so if it's cutting out, just let me know.
Yeah, we'll do.
So lactic threshold. So remember, we talked about lactic threshold, which is our body's ability to use lactate, which if we increase our threshold, it will decrease muscle fatigue, it'll decrease cramping, and this is actually the best indicator of performance. So let's look at these two athletes. If you look at them just based on VO2 max, they have similar VO2 max. The difference, however, is that an athlete 2, the lactate threshold is 70% of VO2 max, whereas athlete 1 is 70% and athlete 2 is 60%. Why that's relevant is, let's say both of these athletes were running at 5 miles an hour, which is below both of their lactate thresholds. They both can probably do that indefinitely because they haven't hit their lactate threshold. However, if I ask the runners to run at 6.5 miles an hour, athlete 2 is going to tire out quickly because lactic acid is going to start accumulating, whereas athlete 1 can continue to do that because they have not hit their lactate threshold and they can continue to exercise at a higher intensity. And that's why increasing your lactate threshold is very important if you want to improve your performance. And one of the best ways to improve your lactate threshold is through interval training or anaerobic exercise. So if you look at this diagram, on the yellow, this is before training. On the red, it's after training. And now this athlete can function at 11.5 miles an hour sustained, whereas before they were functioning at 10 miles an hour before they hit their lactate threshold and started to accumulate lactate. Why that's relevant? Why that's relevant is because then the American College of Sports Medicine 3 times a week. We want you to do both aerobic and aerobic activity. We want you to do it for 5 times a week and short bouts for 20 minutes at a time. So the new recommendation, if you tell someone to exercise, it's, I want you exercising at an intensity where you can't really have a conversation with your neighbor. So if someone says to you, yeah, I go for a walk in the evening with my friend or partner or whatever, and we kind of have a gossip, you're not exercising hard enough. I want you to exercise at an intensity where you cannot have a conversation, and that then you know you're working at an anaerobic level. So this is a gentleman who kind of made anaerobic popular. Anybody know who this is? Raise your hand if you do. No one. I see a lot of head nods. All right, so this is Dr. Azumi Tabata. You may have heard of something called the Tabata protocol. So most of the high intensity interval trainings, when you go to various gyms, use the Tabata protocol. And basically that is a way to achieve supra maximal intensity and period groups. One was the moderate intensity group. So you're working at 70% of your VO2 max. He exercised them 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. So that's a lot of exercise. I mean, an hour a day, 5 days a week is a fair amount of exercise. So the total exercise was 30 hours. He compared that to this high intensity group where he did 8 sets of 20 seconds of exercise, followed by 10 seconds of rest. So in this group, the total exercise both groups improved their oxygen utilization, which means both groups VO2 max went up. However, only in the group who did the high intensity training, which is the yellow, did their anaerobic capacity go up, which is their lactate threshold. So by working 1 hour versus 30 hours, they improved both aerobic and anaerobic potential. And this is kind of a schematic of what high intensity or Tabata training looks like. So 20 seconds here of all out exercise at intensity of 10, followed by 10 seconds of rest. And if you've ever done this before, either on a stationary bike or a treadmill or even sprinting around a track, you feel that exercise intensity even for a short period of time. And that high accelerated heart rate actually lasts a lot longer, which I'm going to talk about in a second. So when we talk about exercise, I'm not going to convince my patient that they should exercise because their VO2 max should go up. People care about weight loss, right? They care about weight loss, they care about performance. They don't care about their VO2 max. So what does the data suggest on weight loss and high intensity interval training? So this was a study done in 1990 that looked at 2,600 men and women, low to moderate group compared to a high intensity group. And what they found was that in the high intensity group, there was a 9-fold reduction of runs the 100-meter dash or 100-yard dash in about 10 seconds. Literally one breath. He takes one breath and runs the entire race. But what happens after he finishes the race? He takes a lap, he puts the flag on, he gets an interview 5 or 10 minutes later, and he's still out of breath. He ran for 10 seconds, and 5 to 10 minutes later, he's still out of breath. He's still kind of got an accelerated heart rate. So why does that happen? Here's why. High intensity interval training, the body uses glycogen, which is stored in your muscles for fuel. During low to moderate intensity, which is called jogging, the body uses fat for fuel. Now you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, if I want to burn fat, I should just do low to moderate intensity. Isn't that the goal? High intensity interval training, your body replenishes all that glycogen by burning fat. Contrast with if you do a low to moderate intensity and you burn fat the whole time, that's great. Intensity training of aerobic exercise is in this red bar, but then you are burning. Oh, sorry. The red bar is aerobic exercise, so you're burning fat while you exercise. The blue bar is when you do high intensity interval training, and after you finish exercising, you're burning fat for up to 40 hours later. And that's called afterburn. And that's why when you do a high intensity interval training, you'll go home, you'll shower, you'll have a meal. A little bit later, you're high intensity interval training compared to low to moderate intensity interval training. Well, I actually talked a lot faster than I figured. So we talk a lot about this. I have a podcast called The Backstory where we talk about exercise and weight loss and core strengthening. A lot of things that come up in my clinic, from sleeping and mattresses and supplements, and various different procedures for back pain, all with the purpose, again, of what physiatry is meant for, is improving function, improving quality of life, minimizing pain, and keeping people as healthy as possible. So sorry if I ran through that quickly. I thought it was going to take me a little bit longer, but now I have the opportunity to field some questions from you all, see what you're interested in, and see how I can help. All right,
Perfect. Okay. So, if everybody wouldn't mind, this is only because we're not in a physical building and we can't give you an actual round of applause, but there's a little button in the reactions on Zoom. So if everyone wouldn't mind giving our guest speaker a little virtual round of applause, that would be much appreciated. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for speaking to us. And if people have questions, and you'd like to raise your hand, you're more than welcome to do that now. And then we'll go ahead and we'll call on you in the order that your hand appears in. And if you would prefer to use the chat to ask questions, I'll turn the chat back on now. And then people can ask questions about Dr. Singh's career or his path into medicine, or the talk that he just gave about like sports medicine. So feel free to ask whatever questions you'd like. We'll start with Kaylin.
Hi. So, in your clinic, in your line of work, what is like the most common injury you usually see? What do you help people with the most usually?
Oops, I think he's frozen.
Patients coming in who are either lifting their kids or lifting their grandkids. That was a common condition. Patients bending improperly, lifting things off the ground. Since COVID, I would say the most common thing is upper back and neck pain, because we are Zooming a lot more. People are working remotely. They don't have a good ergonomic setup at their house. So the computer and the keyboard aren't positioned optimally. So people start getting upper back and neck pain, causing migraines, causing radiating pain into their arms. So it really takes a lot of re-education about the best setup for their computer and workstation at home, and B, really upper back exercises to kind of balance that from home. So those are probably the two most common things that I see throughout my work.
Would you be able to repeat the first part, because I think your Wi-Fi cut out for.
I don't know. I'm sorry about my Wi-Fi.
No worries.
Okay. Basically, I said the most common thing I saw pre-COVID was lower back pain. So people sitting a lot, compressing the disc. Remember, down, you're squeezing that disc. Think of kind of like a jelly donut being compressed. When you're standing up, you decompress the spine and bring nutrients and oxygen. So I really saw a lot of back pain pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, a lot of upper back and neck pain just from poor posture and poor ergonomics.
Perfect. Thank you. Our next question will be from Ishita.
Hi, Dr. Singh. My name is Ishita. I'm tuning in from Canada, Saskatchewan today. I was curious about how in your field, how often do you get to deal with young kids and young children? Particularly, I'm asking this question because I deal with chronic pain and I have dealt with it my entire life. And how common is it to encounter that in your field? And perhaps are there any sort of educational programs or something that training that you have to undergo to particularly work with children in the field itself? Thank you.
Great question. So when it comes to children, it really depends on the diagnosis. Just like I put in my initial slide. If the child has suffered from a neurodegenerative condition or a birth condition, like something like cerebral palsy or spinal cord injury, then my pediatric rehab specialists typically see those patients. If it's someone who is suffering from chronic pain or had a fracture as a kid or tore their ACL, then I will see them, and my sports medicine pediatric colleague will see them. So in my practice, I probably see 5 or 10% pediatric patients. Most of it's gymnasts, volleyball players, some type of tumbler, who does a lot of back bends and develops back pain. Sometimes you get these small micro fractures in the spine and you don't know about it as a kid. Then you're in your 20s and 30s and you finally go see a doctor and they get an x-ray and they say, hey, you have a fracture there. You probably had it 10 or 15 years ago. It's healed, but that could be a source of your pain. And really, I think the most important thing I tell these young kids is not single sport specializing too early. Really having a diverse experience with cross training, staying flexible, but not too flexible, maintaining strength in these muscles. These are kind of just general tips to avoid injury. And then if you are someone suffering from chronic pain, then get it treated. The worst thing is to let that linger and turn from an acute problem to a chronic problem, because it has. Should I answer some of these questions in the chat, or have you?
Yeah, feel free to go ahead and answer some of
Okay.
the ones.
While the people are raising their hand. So just a little bit about my journey. So I went to medical school and undergraduate. I minored in psychology. Basically, I wanted to do religion because I really had an interest in different people's faiths and beliefs. And I thought, how can I bring that concept to medicine? So that was kind of the interest of me choosing the majors I did. Biology I did because I had taken. I actually thought I was going to do orthopedics first. So I applied for orthopedics. I did not match the first year, which can be kind of demoralizing, but it was a good lesson for me. And then I started doing research at NYU in New York in orthopedics, finally matching into surgery. But just the hours were not fun. The people were kind of, unhappy even as they went through their training. So I said, what kind of life is this? And that's when I shifted careers after my first year of residency into physical medicine rehabilitation. And it was the best decision I ever made. So that's kind of my journey. Question, should I call on someone?
Yeah, feel free to call on anyone that has their hand up. If you called on someone, I don't think we heard it.
Oh, Jushin Dillon.
Oh, hello, Dr. Singh. My name is Jashan Dilla. Just a quick question. Like you already brought it up with like your religious studies. How do you think, like, how do you find like culture intersects with like prognosis and diagnosis? Because I know different cultures have different like ideas of what exercise, how exercise can help them,
Sure.
especially here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for me is to not impose my beliefs on my patients, right? Everyone comes in with their own belief system. Everyone has their different philosophies and ideas. So I think why I study religion was to really understand the patient's experiences and what perspective. Really similar. We have different cultures and different practicals, application and different language. But I think fundamentally we all kind of believe the same thing. We believe in a healthy body, healthy mind, staying functionally active, being involved with our communities, and that's kind of what rehab is to kind of incorporate all of those things. So I think it was beneficial for me because I can relate to a lot of, but also in trying to spread the word of exercise and health to your patients. All right, Melinda, you have a question?
Hi, my name is Melinda. I'm from Virginia, and my question is, what procedures do you think we should take now at a younger age to prevent the kind of injuries that you see on a day-to-day basis?
Most important is maintain ideal body weight. If you
Okay.
of
Yeah.
weight extra, it's about 7 to 10 pounds on your spine. And for every pound of weight extra, it's about 3 to 5 pounds on your joints. So just by eliminating a few extra pounds here and there, you're going to degenerate at a much less frequency than someone who is overweight and carrying on more mass. So that's the most important thing. The second thing is resistance training. Having lean muscle mass is going to increase your basal metabolic rate, which is going to allow you to burn more calories throughout the day. And also it's going to protect your bones.
Okay. And then also for those of us who lift weights, how do you suggest we prevent injuries for ourselves?
Yeah, mostly complex instead of doing like hammer curls, that's going to just target one single muscle, doing complex movements that incorporate core and glutes and upper body all at the same time is going to protect you. But flexibility. Once you strengthen a muscle, it's important to make that muscle flexible. So incorporating some yoga, some Pilates like once a week will just probably help you prevent injury.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Zainab Qureshi.
Hi, my name is Zanab Kreshi. I'm a high school student right now, and my question for you is a little bit more personal based on your experiences. But I wanted to know, how did you know that you wanted to study rehabilitation and physical medicine specifically? Like, out of all of the different fields, when did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So luckily, my high school ended in March of my senior year, and we all went on a quest project where you would work in a field where you thought you had interest. So you could work with a lawyer, you could work with the police and do like a ride-along program. So I ended up working with the orthopedic surgeon and spending 3 months with them, going to the operating room, going to clinic, really doing physical. So I knew orthopedics in high school, and throughout college, I pursued orthopedic research. Throughout medical school, I continued with orthopedics until I finally became a surgeon. And then I realized this is not for me. This is not the life that I choose to have. I really want to balance lifestyle and seeing patients. So physical medicine rehabilitation is a great balance of the two. I get to work with my hands. I get to focus on anatomy and function. I get to see a lot of patients. So really having a good work-life balance was important to me, and that's what I accomplished with rehab.
All right, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Leandra?
Hi, Dr. Singh. My name is Leandra. I have a question about med school because I've heard that med school can be very tiring, and I know that many students sometimes burn out. And I was wondering if you have any advice for any future medical students or people who are or students who are interested in going to med school and
Yeah.
process.
There's been a lot of changes, insurance and bureaucracies and hospital systems. Yeah, I mean, that's probably true for any field. But if you really go into medicine for the right reasons, I think it's a very satisfying field. You get to impact a lot of lives every day, and for the better, if you can, make people healthier when they're sick. One thing we don't do a great job of in medicine is well care. We call ourselves healthcare professionals. We're really sick care professionals. We wait for someone to get sick. We wait for someone to get injured, and then we intervene instead of doing what we're doing now, which is preventative. Let me teach people how to prevent injury, how to maintain ideal body weight so that you don't need me in the future. And I think in medicine, we don't do a good job. Is that the way physicians are paid is when they do things. We don't get paid if everyone's healthy. We get paid when people are sick and get injured. Not a great model. The incentives are perverse. We're waiting for bad things to happen so we can intervene. So I think we need to do a better job of preventative care. And I think rehab is a great place for. All right, next, Chima. Sorry if I said that wrong.
Hi, my name is Chidima. I'm from Nigeria. And my question is, how can anaerobics be applicable to somebody who has a torn ligament at the knee?
Say the first.
How can anaerobics be helpful to somebody who has a torn ligament?
Yeah, you got to be careful with that. So the question was about if you have torn ligaments or tendon issues around the knee, how can anaerobics be helpful? So you got to be safe first of all, because when you're doing high intensity interval training, you're putting a lot of stress on the ligaments, a lot of stress on the tendons and the joint. So you want to prepare those muscles. There's a fair amount of literature that says when you stress tendons or stress ligaments to create these micro tears, which then bring blood and bring nutrients to the tissue, you're actually creating an environment for them to heal and heal stronger. So there is some good research showing strengthening fractures or micro tears at the tendon to bring in size, and strengthening is a great way to do that. All right, Khadija El Tami. Do you guys hear me? All right, we could go to Amr Ahmed.
Hello, I want at first to thank you about this awesome session and the useful information. My question is, what is your advice for the high school students?
You got a lot of time to think about it. I didn't know what I was doing in high school. I mean, high school, we were trying to figure out who you are as a person, what kind of person you want to be in the world, how to treat people. But I think just being open-minded, even college, if I could change one thing in college, I'm a first generation. My parents are immigrants to this country. So all of my pressures were getting good grades. It wasn't really about learning. It was always, what are your grades? What are your grades? And no one ever asked me, what did you learn today? So I think if I did it over again, I'd go to college and really learn a lot more, spend time in the classroom and ask questions, because that's what college is about. Instead of just getting A's and getting into a little differently. So be open-minded.
Sorry, I'm Khadija.
Okay. 1 second, Khadija. I just think be open-minded, ask questions, see what you're interested in, and get a good mentor. Nothing replacing a good mentor that can help you guide you in the right direction. All right, Khadija.
My name is Khadija. I'm a student. I want to ask about basic every.
Say it again. Davina, did you get that?
I don't think so.
Okay. If you type it in, Khadija, I will respond in the chat window. But let's go to Sophia.
Hello. Thank you so much for taking my question, and thank you so much for also your time today. I had 2 quick questions. The first one is, what kind of high interval test training do you typically recommend? Because you mentioned Tabata, so do you normally recommend that, or does it depend on the person and their goals? And my second question is, I love your bookshelf. You have so many books. What are some of your favorite books?
I think you froze for a sec.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh my God, I don't know why my Wi-Fi is so bad today. The first thing about anaerobic exercise, I think if you are young and healthy, then you can do P90X and some of these plyometric workouts because your joints and ligaments can handle it. For someone like me, I can't handle it. So I tell my patients to get on a stationary bike or a treadmill and go as fast as they can on the stationary bike for 20 seconds and then relative rest 10 seconds. Fast as they can, relative rest. So that's a great way to get intensity training. On a treadmill, the way to do that is with incline. Rest. So I am big on self-help. I'm big on personal growth books. How to be rich and how to keep your money. So some of the books I recommend are The Millionaire Next Door. That's a great book to read just on, don't try to keep up with your neighbors. What I knew when at your age in high school, I mean, you're ahead of the game. I mean, start saving now. No one told me about savings until I was 30 years old. So imagine if you have 15-year head start, you're going to be in a much better position. And thank you about the comment about the books. I know a lot of hands are up. I think we can get through a few more questions. We'll probably we'll do Ala Muhammad, Akshita, and then Prada Deng. Okay, go ahead, Ala.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, is the sports medical considered as an academic career?
All about treating athletes who are not just professional athletes, but anybody who exercises, anybody who's working out in the weekend and getting injured. That's sports medicine. We do that in academics. We work at the university. We do research. We teach the next generation. I think that's probably the most satisfying part of the job.
Okay, thank you.
Akshita?
Hi, I'm Akshita, and I was just wondering, like, what type of like diet, or I mean, like, what programs you recommend for weight loss with like the HIIT, and if it's like YouTube, or if we have to like do like a paid membership type thing, or if
Yeah,
we can just do it at home.
Yeah, nowadays, I mean, there's so much that's free. There's so many exercise programs and videos that are out there that you can kind of just stream. So I would you can download any video and do something as long as your body can handle it. In terms of diet, most of the literature surrounds low carbs and higher protein. I think in this country, or at least in the United States, we don't need enough protein. We are really polysaturated carbs and sugar and kind of a lot of the bad stuff in processed foods. So if we just change that a little bit, I'm not zero carb, but just balancing how many carbs and how much protein you eat is just a quick way to build lean muscle and decrease your body's reliance on carbohydrates, which messes up your insulin, which messes up a lot of stuff. So that would be the quick and dirty. Just try to good question though. All right, Prada.
Thank you.
Hi, firstly, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I'm a current high school senior, and I'm looking for things like internships or shadowing opportunities. How do you suggest like I reach out to people? Like, should I reach out to local doctor's offices or aim more towards like hospitals?
It's tough, and if you're an individual doctor in private practice, you may not have the bandwidth or a high school student or someone shadowing them. Usually people who have presented at conferences, they're people who are into education already, they're into research, so they're probably going to be more well. And then contacting some of the speakers in your city or wherever you pretty easy to do. So I think that would be the best way to do it.
Okay.
Sorry, Dr. Singh, we just have one more question from the chat if you have time for it.
Sean, which one is that?
It's what technologies or developments in the field have been the most relevant or impactful in your practice?
So I would say there's two answers to that. The first is stem cells. So I do a lot of research with stem cells, things called PRP, platelet-rich plasma, bone marrow, fat stem cells. Actually, I tore my rotator cuff, probably doing P90X or something stupid. And I got stem cells put in my shoulder on Monday. So we'll see if that will heal the tear and I can avoid surgery. But basically, stem cells are really exciting because we are repairing tissue. We are regenerating sometimes cartilage and things in the knee that can prevent arthritis or prevent the need for knee replacement. So that's very, very exciting in my space. The other thing is something called neuromodulation. Basically, the way our brain perceives pain is through nerves. So if we can modulate how that nerve is bringing information to the brain, we can treat pain that way. So something called spinal cord stimulator, peripheral nerve stimulators. These are really, really exciting and devices that I implant. I put them in the spine. I put them along various nerves that can help treat patients' pain. When you're in less pain, you're more likely to exercise and be functional. And again, that's my goal. My goal is to keep people moving. Movement is medicine, and we just use these technologies to get there.
Thank you.
Great question. Davina, feel free to share my contact with anyone. You can share my email address. I'm happy to be a mentor when I can and lead you in the right direction.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the last part again?
I said, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to share my email with the group. If you need advice on training or books or finding a mentor, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I have your email and we'll link your social media as well. So that people
Super.
know.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
No worries. Okay, so thank you so much again for coming to talk to us and for answering a lot of our questions. I'll be sure to send everyone your email and the slides so they can catch up. And I'll also be linking Dr. Singh's talk from when he spoke at our summer program a couple of years ago, in case you wanted to listen to that as well. So all that will be made available after the session today. So don't worry, we'll post everything after the session is done. But thank you again, Dr. Singh, and feel free to head out if you have to go now.
All right. Sorry about my Wi-Fi. Thanks for inviting me again.
No worries. Have a great day. All right. So I'm going to launch a poll now on Zoom. So this poll is for attendance for our guest speaker shadowing session. There's another poll that you're going to have to answer at the end of the session that will count for your overall attendance. But I'm going to just launch this poll now. So please feel free to answer it. It's super easy. It's just, who is our guest speaker today? And then what is their profession? So this is just a quick way for us to be like, okay, they joined the session today and they know what our guest speaker's profession is about. So please feel free to answer that now. I'm going to close it in about a minute or so, but take your time, answer it. Everyone's getting it right so far. So good job, everyone. But yes, we will do that Zoom poll, and then Rourke, who's one of our executive interns, will be taking over and running our CPR workshop this year. And fun fact, he is almost a fully trained EMT, so he has lots of fun equipment to show us and lots of cool techniques and insights to share about emergency medicine as someone that's training to be an EMT. Okay, I see that about 80% of you have filled out the poll. Please do that now so that we can get you down for attendance. And like we mentioned earlier, we're going to link Dr. Singh's talk from a couple of years ago. It's kind of similar, and I don't think his Wi-Fi was cutting out as much, so you'll hopefully be able to hear more of it.
I'm sorry, but what are we supposed to do for attendance?
So yeah, if you just click on the poll, so a poll should have popped up on your screen. If it didn't pop up for you, you can message me on Slack and say, hey, I didn't see the poll, and then I'll just make an exception for you if you message me now. But just answer the poll.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I'll answer Allah's question before we move on to our workshop. Allah, do you have a question?
Okay. I just want to know when's the next session?
Yeah, so our sessions for this program, our national program, are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, same time each time. So 5:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Might be a little bit different for you.
Okay, can you send us
The poll is failed to submit. What can I do?
Okay, so I'm going to take other questions at the end of the session today. Don't worry if you have questions about the program structure or the timings or anything. I'm going to stick around after the session is done, and I'll be here to answer any and all of the questions that you have, okay? All right, so...
No, my poll is failed to submit. What can I do?
It's okay if it doesn't submit, just message. I'll make an exception for you if you just message me now on Slack, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. Please, everyone, get your responses in. Almost 90% of you have done it. It's just an easy way for us to get your attendance. And okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you, everyone, for answering it. We had 99% of you get it right. And I will pass it off to Rourke now. So the way that our workshop will work is Rourke has a workshop for us on CPR and emergency first aid. So there are some questions that he'll be asking all of you throughout the session. If you want to answer those questions, please feel free to raise your hand virtually on Zoom or type something in the chat. We'll be monitoring that as well. And then Rourke or we will call on you, and then you can feel free to participate that way. And then he'll have time to answer any content related questions at the end of his workshop, or if he has time in between. But you're more than welcome to go ahead and get started.
Sweet. Okay, let me just share my screen really quick. And we will get started. 1 second. One second, sorry.
No worries. And while we're waiting, I'm going to send a guest speaker thank you form in the chat. So if you fill out this form for every guest speaker that we have for the summer program, you'll get an hour, you'll get 1 volunteer hour from us. And it's just a nice way of us to say thank you to our guest speakers in a way that they can, read it after the program is done. So I'm going to just send that form in the chat now. You don't have to fill it out right now. It's not really due until the program has been completed because, you have to submit it for all of the guest speakers. But feel free to fill it out now if you have a second and you'd like to while we're waiting. And I'll also send this out on Slack and in our email later on, so you can do it then. But it's just a nice way for you to get some volunteer hours and for our guest speakers to know that you appreciated them coming in to talk to you.
Davina, I have to quit and reopen to share, so just re-admit me in a second.
Okay, I don't mind sharing my screen too if you'd like me to share it, and then you can just tell me to move on.
Okay, that works too. Let me just go more. Oh, wait, I think it worked. Everyone see?
Yes.
All right, perfect. And we will put a slideshow. Okay, perfect. We are going to quickly, David, do you have a question before we start? Okay, perfect. We're going to just go quickly through just because we went over this before Dr. Singh spoke. So let's just, if you want to raise your hand to answer a question, just raise your hand on the feature and we will answer you. And I'm going to try and talk slowly so everyone can have a chance to hear me. Perfect. Okay. So first off, how's everyone feeling after the first talk? I know it was a lot of information, but it's some really cool stuff. I'm super interested in research on stem cells. I've done a couple of things at school about it. So I hope everyone is feeling good and excited. Fortunately today, because I am just finishing up my EMT training, I actually have access to a lot of the equipment. So not only will you be able to learn about some of the equipment, I'm going to be able to show you a lot of it, which is great. So we are going to be talking about emergency first aid and CPR today, and this will be your first workshop. So the background information is first aid certifications. Basically, CPR level A is CPR for adults. It is what most companies or workplaces will have for training in case one of their employees has a heart problem. So there's that. And then CPRC is for children and babies. And then BLS is all forms of basic life support. And so that includes level A, level C, and some other training for different situations beyond CPR. So like this graph shows, emergency first aid is CPR A and CPR C, and then BLS is also standard first aid. So like I said, CPR A is for adults. It goes over choking procedures, which you need to do CPR for, defibrillators and defibrillation and emergencies. CPR B is only for babies, and then CPR C is the combination of children, babies, and adults. What are the 3 C's? So I didn't actually learn it as the 3 C's, but I think the 3 C's is a great way to describe it. And the 3 C's are check, call, and care. When you first get to a patient or just someone walking down the street, regardless of if you are on an ambulance as an EMT or just someone walking down the street with basic CPR training, the first thing you want to do is check. You want to check the scene, you want to check the area, and you want to check the patient. You want to make sure that the scene is safe in order for you to go and help the patient. You want to make sure that the area is safe so that nothing further damaging will come to you or the patient. And then you want to check the patient. And the first thing you're going to want to check is if they are awake and if they are breathing. Then you're going to want to call. Before you check, or as you're checking the breathing and if they're awake, you want to ideally get someone else nearbye's attention and ask them to call 911 or whatever the emergency service number is where you are. Where I am right now, it's 101. So it changes depending on what country you're in. And then you want to start getting care. If you are by yourself, you will generally try and call as you are doing the checking. And instead of holding the phone here, you will put it on speaker and put it next to you as you're doing the checking. Arriving at the scene. So when you're doing the safety check, you want to make sure that there's no fire, there's no wires, and there's no gas or glass. Those are the main different things that can cause injury to yourself or to the patient that is already there. And so you want to take very quickly, 1 to 3 seconds, just make sure that there's nothing there. And then if you see any firearms or other perpetrators, do not touch, don't engage. Your only goal will be to keep yourself safe and to help the patient. The area. If you see a knife in your patient's chest, do not remove it. What happens is the knife is actually keeping the blood inside the body. If you remove the knife, you will remove the cork essentially to the bottle of the body, and that will result in hemorrhaging, which means bleeding from the body. And that is really bad because if your patient loses enough blood, they will die. So please don't do that. And then if your patient is conscious, you want to ask them questions and help keep them conscious. Then you want to check the patient. There are 2 situations when it comes to patient. You want to check if they're conscious. If they are conscious, we do a couple of things differently than if they're unconscious. So this is a quick overview of the scene safe. So these are all the things you want to check. No fire, no wires, no gas, no glass. Also poison, that too. And we'll go over earthquakes and other kinds of disasters later. And then you want to introduce yourself. You want to be really friendly. You want to be nice, and you want to get down to their level. Generally, if a patient is conscious and something bad has happened to them, they are going to start freaking out a little bit. What you want to do is, rather than stand over them, which comes off as aggressive or like you're an authority figure, you want to get down to their level, make eye level as much as possible. If they're lying down, you don't want to lie down next to them, but crouch or sit next to them. And you want to introduce yourself as someone who's going to help them. If you are on an ambulance, I'm obviously not wearing one now. Sorry, I'm not wearing one now because it is not training and I'm not on a shift, but you will have a uniform, which can easily tell them that you are a first aid responder. And if you're not, you want to introduce yourself as a civilian and generally say, I have training in this, so they feel safe with you. Now, the next step is you do not want to leave the patient until EMS arrives, so emergency services, generally an ambulance. The patient starts to breathe if they're not breathing. If you are tired, the general rule of thumb is about 2 minutes of chest compressions when you're doing CPR. If there is no one nearby to switch out with you, keep going because you are the only thing that is trying to keep this patient breathing. And if there is someone to switch out with you, you want to switch out with them. And then if the scene becomes unsafe, you have to move. So we briefly, I don't know if you guys read it on the first slide before, but you generally want to treat children or before adults because children are more delicate than adults and adults are more aware. So you want to treat the children first, generally. So this is a good way of remembering what to do when you have a conscious patient. It is called sample. So these are the kind of questions you want to ask them. S is signs and symptoms. What are you feeling? What have you been up to? those kind of things. If they have symptoms, there are a lot of different kind of things that have to do with the heart, have a lot of similar symptoms. Same things with things that have to do with the lungs, because especially when you're talking about the lungs, the problem often is trouble breathing, and there are lots of different things that trouble breathing can do with. Allergies, if they're allergic to something that they may have come in contact with, but also in case you're going to give them any medication, you want to make sure they're not allergic to it, because that can make it a lot worse. Any medication that they take or should have taken and they did not, because that could be the thing that's causing the issue. Their past medical history. Generally, if you are dealing with someone who has allergies or have had severe injuries in the past, they will know it, as well as elderly patients will almost always know all the things that have happened in their past medical history. Their last intake, food and water, or other drink, but water is the best one, because if they are not feeling well, if they're dizzy, anything like that, food and water could be the cause. And if they remember anything, you want to know what happened before, but also if they don't remember anything, you really want to rule out any head injury. Now, scenario 2 is an unconscious patient. Unconscious, anytime someone is unconscious, you want to call 911 or whatever your emergency number is. Being unconscious is really bad for the body, and even if they are breathing and unconscious and their pulse is okay, their blood circulating, you don't know if it's going to get worse at any time, because whatever's causing them to be unconscious could further get worse. So the first thing you want to do when you're getting to a patient is you want to say their name if you know it. You won't know their name if they're a random stranger, but they might have family or something nearby, and they'll tell you, oh, this is my son, oh, this is my brother, etc. Or make noises, clapping their hands, stuff like that. And then if they don't respond to that, you want to tap them on their shoulders or pinch their trach, which is this muscle here, the trap muscle right here, because there's a good amount of pain that will come from here with no actual damage to the neck or anything like that. And that will generally wake someone up who is just asleep or fainted. So you want to do that. If the tapping doesn't do anything, you can also pinch the trap. It's really good. And you want to pinch pretty hard. And so, right, this is the simulate muscle contraction in their neck. That's what the tapping does. The pinching does it a little harder. And so when you want to check consciousness, if they don't respond to sound, pain is a great other thing that they might respond to. And if they wake up, amazing. Now, like I said before, the second thing you want to do after you check the scene is safe is you want to get someone to call 911. If you haven't already, you definitely should, because you're on the street, and ambulances have a lot more equipment and medication that can be helpful for treating patients. So for their airway, you want to tilt their chin back. It is called the head tilt chin lift. So you tilt their head back and lift their chin. And you want to check their ABCs, which is airways, breathing, and circulation. So you do that by putting your ear next to their mouth and hearing and listening for their breath, and then either touching or looking at their chest to see if it's rising and falling for breathing. And you want to do that for about 5 to 10 seconds. And if they are not, you want to get to work on CPR pretty much immediately. So if they are breathing, then all is pretty good in comparison to not breathing. And you want to put them in the recovery position and monitor their ABCs. The airway, breathing, and circulation is the most important part of being unconscious, and you want to monitor that basically the entire time you're with the patient, because anytime there's a change in the airway, breathing, or circulation, oxygen will stop getting pumped to the brain, and the brain only needs about 4 minutes to start deteriorating. And brain cells do not heal; they do not regenerate. And so once you lose the brain cells, it can be permanent damage. So recovery position is bent over. That's so when the tongue or anything else won't block the airway. When you are unconscious, your tongue relaxes and it can actually block the airway itself. So you put the head on the side, you bend the knee over, you gently roll them over, And that way the tongue won't fall into the neck or down the esophagus rather. And you also will not have any liquid buildup in the mouth. It will fall out. Now, if they are on, and this is how you check the ABCs. Now, if they're unconscious and breathing, some of the causes can be diabetes. So if they have irregular blood sugar, diabetes there are two types. Type 1 is when there's a problem with insulin. Insulin is secreted in order to regulate blood sugar. So it regulates whether or not your body uses the sugar, and it keeps it at a stable level. When you eat sugary things, the body will release insulin, and it will use that sugar to lower and keep it at a stable level. The stable level, just fun fact, is about 60 to 110 blood sugar. And then dehydration, if you are dehydrated and you don't have water in your body, your blood will have a harder time pumping. And so that can cause you to faint. And then also sometimes people pass out because they see blood or something and they get scared. And so I wrote that down as weak stomach. So if people have a weak stomach and they're scared easily by blood or something like that, needles, they might pass out. And then seizures. We will cover seizures a little bit more later. This on the left is what a blood sugar monitor looks like. And generally, if you have diabetes, you definitely know about this. If you do not, it's a little needle and you prick the side of the finger and you get a tiny little bit of blood, you put it in the device and it reads your blood sugar. And then on the right is the blood pressure pump that goes around the arm and it measures the blood pressure. Blood pressure should generally be 100 to 140 over 60 to 90. It's okay if it's a little bit higher or lower. And what those numbers mean is the number above, the 100 to 140, is the blood pressure that you can start hearing the pulse at. When you're using this machine, you'll have the stethoscope underneath. So when you start hearing it, it'll be about 100 to 140, and then you lower the pressure all the way down, and at 60 to 90, you will stop hearing the pulse, and that's what you're aiming for. Unconscious and not breathing. So this is the most important thing for people to know. It's really important for just civilians to understand CPR because you never know if someone you know might need CPR, and starting CPR. Oh, I went too far. Starting CPR before the ambulance get there is really important. The faster you start CPR, the more likely they are to survive. So knowing CPR is really important. If I know this is a national program, so a lot of North Americans, if you remember in the news, there was a football player last year who had a heart attack on the field and they saved his life because they started CPR almost immediately. So those kind of things, if those trainers weren't ready to go, there's a good chance he would not have made it, and he's made a full recovery, which is pretty amazing. So compressions, you want to hold your arms like this. I'm going to get up so I can show you. You want to have them locked, and it does not matter which arm you have underneath. It's just whatever one you feel like you can get better pressure with. And then you want to push into the center of the body. I'm going to show you on the dummy in a second, but generally it'll be in the center of the chest, in between the nipples, and that's the right height and area. And you want to go to about 5 centimeters depth. 5 to 6 is generally considered good. And if you are on the street and by yourself, you have no equipment, CPR is all you want to do until the ambulance gets there, and then you will hand over care to the EMTs. Ooh, I see a good question. EMTs give medicine to help them with pain. That is entirely dependent on what the condition is, because EMTs are not allowed to diagnose in the field many, many different things, because it is required to have different tests that are done at the hospital, ECGs, CAT scans, x-rays. So you don't want to give medication to a patient that you don't actually know what's going on with them. Generally, the thing they almost all ambulances will be able to administer is aspirin for heart problems. That is because one of the main problems with when it comes to circulation is clotted arteries, so blockage in the arteries, and aspirin's a blood thinner, so it makes it easier to pump, and that's why. Beyond that, a lot of ambulances have various pain medications. It depends on the ambulance and the situation, what they can give. And generally only paramedics, so they are a higher level of EMT. They're the highest level. There's normally 4 levels, and paramedics are the highest. They're the only ones who can administer strong medication in the field. So if you do have equipment, however, I'm going to do the best I can with this angle, but basically you will have something like this. So if this is the dummy right here, you will be able to use something called a BVM or an ambo, which looks like this. Looks like this. It's a pump, and what you're going to do is attach a few different things to it. It comes with a mask, and there's a different size for adults and children, and it comes with a filtration device. So you attach them, and then on the other end, you will have a bag normally here. This one doesn't have it, but you'll have a bag, and this little part here, so you guys can see, this knob will attach to an oxygen tank, which is in this bag. And then, so the dummy, you will attach the mask onto the patient, like so, and one person will be doing CPR, and for every 30 beats of compressions on an adult, you will do 2 breaths just like this. You just squeeze the hand once, twice, and then they will start CPR again. And you basically go into that signal unless the defibrillator tells you otherwise. For children, you want to go a lot narrower. So generally 1/3 to 1/2 chest depth, which comes out to normally about 3 centimeters deep. And babies, you want to do 2 finger compressions. So like I said, you want to do compressions, locked arms, pushing down. With babies, you can do it in 2 different ways. I wish I had a baby doll with me. I do not, unfortunately, but you want to do it like this, either pushing into the finger, or what you can do is put your hands on both sides of the babies, connect your thumbs, and push with your thumb. Those are the 2 techniques. It's generally, there isn't one that's better than the other inherently, but what you want to do, I will answer that question in a second, but what you want to do is whatever's more comfortable for you so that you can provide the best treatment. When mouth to mouth stop being CPR? I don't know when. It is, I think COVID had a lot to do with it. I think it was a little bit before COVID. They were starting to phase it out for things like the AMBO, BVM, and there's other masks that are more automated, so you don't even have to push depending on what your ambulance has. But they mostly stop doing it because they don't want to spread anything that the patient might have to the paramedic or the EMT, and also because it's more effective to do it this way. And great question, what is the age of the baby? It is up to 8 months typically is a baby, and then a child is from 8 months to signs of maturity. So that means puberty. So basically hair or generally hair or beard on people like that. So generally hair or beard or height is also a great sign. So physical maturity, generally ages 12 to 14 is when you stop doing considering them a child. Okay, I will keep going. And for the 2 minutes, you just do it. We only go past 2 minutes if there's no one else to take over. And you want to do compressions at 100 to 120 compressions per minute. Or a great way to know about this is to use songs that are at that BPM. one of them is staying alive, and that is a common one that people know. Okay, we'll continue. So these are some of the equipment. A suction is combined with the catheter. The catheter will attach to the suction. So you will use this to get any excess vomit or liquids out of the mouth of a patient. And then the oxygen tank, which I have over here, looks like this. It's very simple. You do two knobs, and then you attach it with the wire or with the tube. The only thing with oxygen safety is you really want to keep it away from the defibrillator, because electricity or something that can start a fire with oxygen is really dangerous. So you really want to keep those apart from each other. And the oxygen tank should be laid on its side horizontally instead of left up vertically, because the last thing you want to do is someone walk over, kick it, the nozzle gets broken and it goes flying like a rocket. So you don't want to do either of those things. And then now we are going to quickly, I'm going to give you guys like 1 minute. Try to use a pillow or something like that and practice CPR. At the end, I'm going to give you guys a couple more tips for CPR and how to practice at home. But I'm just going to give you guys 1 minute to practice what you would do if you see your pillow or person on the ground unconscious.
دقيقة بسرعة. أول حاجة مكتوبة إيه؟
And I want to say the chat is really interesting. I think a lot of things in stem cells is really, really interesting. And diabetes is treated with insulin, but that's basically the main treatment we have right now. Type 2 diabetes is treated with different medication, because instead of the insulin that is the problem, the receptors that the insulin attaches to are the problem. So they have different medications for that. Okay. Anyone who wants to keep practicing and listen away. And I'm going to continue to some of the other things we want to talk about. Choking. So choking is dangerous because it impacts the ABCs, which we've talked about, are the three most important things you have to monitor in a patient, because they all can lead to the brain getting damaged. So if someone is choking and they are only partially choking, the easiest way to determine this is if they can speak or if they can make noise with their throat. So coughing or wheezing, that means the airway is still somewhat open, and you want to tell them to keep coughing, because that is the best thing to do. The coughing might push whatever's blocking partially out their throat. And so you want to ask them if they can help you. You want to ask them, can you help them? Encourage the patient to keep coughing, and then call 911 if you are not a part of the ambulance. If it becomes complete choking, and you'll know that because they can't make any noise and they'll be really scared and pointing at their neck, you want to do the Heimlich maneuver. The Heimlich maneuver is you attach both your fists like this, and you push into their stomach, and you push up and in until it is dislodged from the throat. Does anyone know when you stop doing the Heimlich maneuver? Great. Okay, so I've seen both the answers. I was expecting to see when they can talk, cough, when the object is cleared first, but Dawn is also right, when the victim falls unconscious. So the two times you stop doing the Heimlich are if the patient spits out whatever they're choking on and the airway is clear, or if they fall unconscious, you then stop doing the Heimlich and you start CPR immediately. So if you have patients that are pregnant or in wheelchairs, things like this, you will have to do the Heimlich a little bit higher. And so it's what we call a chest thrust. You want to get down to the level, make sure that you can do it properly so that you're not. So if it's a wheelchair, you want to get down to the level. And if it's a pregnant person, you want to make sure that you're not impacting the baby. So you do it up here. It's less effective, but it's unfortunately the way we have to do it with these kinds of patients. Other special cases, yeah, so this is what I just talked about. And then in babies and children, we do something called smoking the baby. Basically what it is you want to hold the baby like this, and you want to hold them at a 9-degree angle like this. You use these 2 fingers to open their mouth, and you're going to hit their back with the palm of your hand 5 times, and then flip the baby around, and then use your 2 fingers to do compressions 5 times, flip them around, and keep doing that until the airway is free and whatever is in their throat comes up. Heart attacks. So heart attacks are a very, very common cause of unconsciousness and stopping of the heart. Some of the symptoms include nausea, vomiting, severe chest pain. Generally, if someone's having a heart attack, you'll know because of the chest pain. And that is because when you ask them, and if they're still conscious, if you ask them where they hurt, they won't be able to point to it. They'll be like here and here and here and here. And that's how you know it is probably a heart attack. If it turns into a stroke, and that is generally caused by either bleeding in the brain or the inability for blood to get to the brain, you want to do the FAST technique. And that is face, arm, speech, time. Face meaning if they're ever having a stroke, their face might be half of it's frozen. They won't be able to smile. So you generally ask them, can you smile for me? If they only half their face smiles, probably a stroke. Their arms, you want to ask them to raise their arms like this. If they can only raise one arm or they're having trouble, then it is possibly a stroke. And you want to get them to do that with their eyes closed, because if their eyes are open, they might see one dropping and try and keep it the same. Speech, if they're having trouble talking, slurring their words. And then time, you want to know how long this has been happening, how long they've been unconscious, anything like that. Cool. We keep going. Bleeding. When someone is bleeding, you want to clear bandage and compress the wound, and then you want to place another bandage on top. If the wound is too large, you can use a tourniquet. A tourniquet is exactly what it looks like in this picture. The blue plastic string is generally made of silicone, and it's used to stop the bleeding of an afflicted area. So it'll stop the bleeding there, and the rest of the arm won't be able to get blood. A tourniquet is not ideal because it is cutting off circulation to part of the body, and you don't want to damage any part of the body. So direct pressure, so bandages, things like that are generally ideal. But if you have to, because of different circumstances, a tourniquet is a great secondary option, and you want to put it 5 to 10 centimeters above the wound and above the joint as well. Okay. Allergies, we're going to try and go through these pretty quickly because I want to get to the end, which has some practice stuff. So allergic reactions, the main important things to know are you want to remove the blue side of the EpiPen and insert the orange side into the upper outside of the leg. I'll show you on my leg. You do not want to use the inside of the leg because you do not want to puncture the artery that goes here. So you want to do it on the outside, and then you're going to puncture it for 10 seconds, turn the EpiPen, and then rub the area for another 10 seconds to make sure it goes in. An EpiPen is a Band-Aid for a really bad thing. So the EpiPen pumps the patient with lots of adrenaline in order to keep their blood pumping and keep them awake in order to rush them to the hospital where they can get actual treatment. In a lot of cases, you might actually have to use more than one EpiPen. Other emergencies, nosebleeds, never tilt the head up, always down. You don't want the blood to go back into the brain area. Knocked out teeth, put the tooth in milk. It just helps the tooth retain its properties until the EMS arrives. Chemicals in eyes, eye wash, sprains and bone infections, the Rice technique. We're not going to cover it in depth today, but you can Google it. Diabetic emergencies, This is important. If people are forgetting insulin or their blood sugar, or they didn't even know they had diabetes, it can deteriorate into unconsciousness and then into heart failure. So you want to try and figure that out immediately as fast as possible. What if they're diabetic, they haven't taken their insulin, if they're having any problems. And then pulmonary edema is something that you have sometimes. It's a little more rare. It's when liquid or mucus is filling up the lungs, and you want to make sure the patient is sitting up, because if they're sitting down, the liquid will go horizontal like this, and then it could block the airway. So some practice scenarios. This is what I really want to get to. Yes, blue to the sky, orange to the thigh. That is right. So I do see one other comment about clothing. Generally with CPR, you do have to cut off their shirts to get right down to the skin, especially if they're wearing thick clothing. So we're going to do these practice scenarios because I think they're a great way to retain the information. So the background information for this practice scenario is an adult, 32 years old, calls complaining about chest pain. After arriving, you can see the patient is anxious and sweating. What is the first thing you do? Thank you for sharing the RICE technique. Yes, check the scene. Check the scene is always the first thing you do. After checking the scene, what might else you do? Great. I'm loving the attention to detail, getting down to their level. In this case, you wouldn't call 911 because you are 911. So they've already been called, and ABCs. Okay, great. So the first thing you do is you ask the patient what happened and where the pain might be, because they're calling about chest pain, and you see that they're anxious and sweating when you arrive. Right. So look for other symptoms of stroke, ask what they've eaten, feeling. Great. All of these are really good things. Potential heart attack. Right. So you want to ask what's wrong, what happened, if they've done any exercise maybe that's causing them, because some respiratory conditions can, like especially something called COPD, which is common in smokers. When they do a lot of physical exercise, they have a lot of trouble breathing, but it'll go away in about half an hour. So you want to ask what happened and where might it hurt. They tell you that it's all over. They tell you, that's supposed to say pointing. They tell you pointing all over their left side. It says it hurts here and here. What do you guys think the patient might be experiencing? Heart attack. All right. Great. So there's a couple different types of heart attack, but yes, heart attack is what we are looking for here. It is, in the medical terms, called a myocardial infraction. It basically means heart attack, and that is exactly what we're looking for. So great job, everyone who thought heart attack. And we're going to move on to scenario 2. So for this one, a school nurse gets a call from the school. So they have to go to the classroom. And the child is feeling really lightheaded and confused. The nurse asks the child if they've eaten or drank water today. They say yes. The child continues to get worse, dizziness and fatigue until they go unconscious. The nurse then calls for an ambulance. The child is still breathing, but not great, and their pulse is okay. When they get there, what do you think they should do? Okay. Amazing. Blood sugar tests. So anytime anyone goes unconscious, you want to do a blood sugar test, because you get there and the child is breathing and their pulse is okay. The only other thing besides blood sugar tests, so if you're in a team of multiple people that you want to do, is you want to give them some oxygen. So on the oxygen tank, I showed you the mask there can also be attached without the pump. And that way you can give them oxygen to a patient that is still breathing and just help them get more oxygen into their system. And you would generally turn the dial, which is normally at 10, 10 liters of oxygen, to like 6 or 7, so that you don't overload their system. If the pulse isn't okay and it's high and they're still breathing, depending on how high it is, you might not be worried. If it's just a little high, Their body just might be reacting to something. In this case, it is something. And if it's really, really high, you might be worried about a heart problem. But since it's okay and the breathing's just a little shallow, you're fine. And after blood sugar, you find out that the child has diabetes and they did not take your oxygen. So everyone who said blood sugar, great job. That is exactly what you want to do anytime a patient is unconscious. That's scenario 3. An ambulance is called for a baby who is choking. Does anyone want to tell me what are the steps that go into helping the baby? Feel free to type in chat or raise your hand as well. Right? Check the scene's always good when you get there. Okay, Sophia, let's hear it. What do you want to do for a baby who is choking?
Yes, so I believe that you would lay them on their chest on your arm, and you have 2 fingers to keep the mouth open, and then you would hit on their back 5 times, and then turn them around, and then I think from there you would check if it's dislodged, and then keep doing that over and over again.
Right. So the only step you missed,
sorry, yeah,
you
and then
want
2
to do
compressions.
right. So you want to do 5 compressions, then 5 back slaps, as we call them, or back palms. And every time you do, great point, every time you do 5 and 5, you want to check if it's dislodged. So you do not, this is how you do the Heimlich maneuver for a baby. So anyone who said that in chat, great job. And then this is the exact order of how you want to do it. Perfect. Remember that when you have the baby, you want to tilt the body down a little bit so that you're dislodging it outwards and away. And great. Again, always want to check if the scene is safe, ask for permission, all those kinds of things. Check for breathing. Amazing. Practice scenario 4. An ambulance gets called to a house where an adult is having a partial seizure. I don't remember if we covered seizures or if I went through it really quickly. But can anyone tell me why it might be important to get there very quickly? Great. Okay. I'm seeing the answer right away. It could worsen. So a partial seizure is when it's only in part of the body. It could be just the arm shaking really fast, and it could deteriorate into a full seizure, or what we call a grand mal seizure. And generally, I don't remember if I covered this, so I'm going to again ask if anyone knows already what treatment you can provide for someone who's having a seizure. Okay, I see a good question. If you get the scene soon enough, can you prevent it from becoming a full seizure? Generally not. You kind of have to let seizures ride and just pass. You also cannot move a patient into the ambulance or to the hospital while they're having a seizure. So you have to wait. And because we don't have the medication often in the ambulance to calm the seizure down, you often have to let the seizure just pass its course and then take them immediately to the hospital afterwards. Right. So I saw some people say put them on their side, hold them down. And then I saw someone say holding them down is dangerous. So that is a great point. While they are seizing, you cannot touch them. Anything you do, they might shake, anything like that. So what you want to do is you want to remove anything dangerous from the area away from them. And then if it's possible, you want to give them oxygen through the mask, that not the pump, just the one that gives oxygen to someone who's already breathing, to help make sure that they have enough oxygen. There's not much else you can do while the seizure is actually going on. Once the seizure is over, yes, you put them in recovery position, and you want to use a suction to get anything out from their mouth in case they have anything blocking there. So great point. Great job remembering the recovery position. The recovery position is on their side with the knees over and their head on their arm, and it makes sure that their airways will stay open, because then the tongue won't fall back into the throat, and anything in the mouth, saliva or vomit, won't block the throat. So these are the things that you can do. move any nearby objects, like I said, suction, oxygen mask, and once they stop spasming, you can put them in the recovery position. I'm not 100% sure what the purpose of the knee being bent is. As far as I know, it's simply to keep them level. So when you have one leg straight and then one bent, it prevents them from falling forward or back versus just having their legs straight. I don't think there's anything else beyond that. And then again, blood pressure, blood sugar, anytime someone goes unconscious, you want to check those things. And our last practice scenario, an ambulance gets called to a school where a child is having trouble breathing. Right off the bat, it could be a lot of different situations. What are some of the situations you guys think it might be? Right? Allergy is a good option. Asthma is a good option. Panic attack is a good option. When you get called on an ambulance, sometimes you don't have all the information you wish you had. I know a friend who was on a shift not too long ago, and they got a call saying someone had fallen, and so they weren't super rushing. They were like, okay, he's fallen, he's having some trouble, and it turns out he fell off a balcony. It was only one flight up, so he was okay, but that kind of information sometimes you don't always get. So these are some of the situations. It could be an asthma attack, it could be pneumonia, it could be trauma to the chest. So if they get hit really hard in the chest, they could have trouble breathing, or a broken rib that's affecting the lungs. Allergies, COPD, which I talked about, which is a little rarer in kids because it's mostly caused by smokers. And then more information is when you arrive, the initial assessment is increased heart rate, fatigue, swollen lips. Has this helped you guys determining what it might be? Any idea? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of the same answer, and that is the right answer. So if you're not sure, something that could help you guys figure it out is you remove the shirt and rashes and hives are found. But I see all you guys saying the right answer. Anaphylactic shock or an allergic reaction. An allergic reaction is always an ambulance call if it is affecting the airway or if it's affecting multiple systems of the body. So if it's like a stomach problem and a breathing problem, call the ambulance. If it's only a stomach problem, let's say they're having an upset stomach, don't need an ambulance. EpiPen, great. So that is the answer I wanted to see. You give them the EpiPen and then you rush them to the hospital as fast as possible. You guys are great. Thank you for everyone who gave answers. And the best option, if an EpiPen is not available, rush them to the hospital as fast as possible. That is the only other option. An EpiPen is adrenaline. So it helps keep the body awake and alert. And so that is the end of the CPR workshop. Thank you everyone for participating and giving me your answers and staying engaged. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys learned something. And I will be around for some of the other sessions. If you guys have questions about CPR, tomorrow is my last day of training, and then I will be out on shifts on ambulances. So I'm happy to help and answer any of your questions that I can. Just let me know. I'm on the Slack. Send me a message.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, and also thank you to everyone who are appreciating Ulrich's awesome workshop today. So, we have a little interactive for you before we wrap the session up today. But first, I want to just launch our last attendance poll for the day. So I'll keep it up throughout our last interactive, so you can feel free to answer it whenever. Thank you again to Ulrich for an awesome workshop. So if you wouldn't mind going to this website, we have a little quiz just to test your knowledge in an informal way about everything that you've learned today. It's not going to be for marks or participation or anything. It's just a fun way to test your knowledge. So if you want to join this, you're more than welcome to. If not, you're more than welcome to head out. I'm going to stick around after we're done the interactive if you have questions they want to ask about the program or about anything. So feel free to stick around. But if you are if you need to head out, you're more than welcome to. Attendance is all done once you've answered both the polls. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And we're so excited to see you back on Wednesday. We hope you had a great time and we can't wait to see you then. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen because I think everyone has the code now. Give it a sec. I'll let everyone join, and then I'll start in a minute or two. And then while the interactive is going, you can start asking questions if you have any. Yeah, sure. I will send code in the chat and then I'll get started in 1 sec. Someone already sent it. Thank you. Yes, again, if you missed what we just said, if you have to head out, you're more than welcome to. The session is officially done for the day. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start this. And then you can move at your own pace. Okay. All right, so if people have questions about the summer program in general, just really anything that I can hopefully help answer, or maybe Ahmad or Tanuja, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom. It's just the easiest way for us to keep track of everybody and make sure nobody's questions go unanswered. So feel free to raise your hand on Zoom and we will answer your questions or ask it in the chat if you're more comfortable that way. But if you don't have any questions, you're more than welcome to head out. Okay, so someone asked, when's the deadline for the quiz? If you're talking with the guest speaker, thank you form. It's not due till the very end of the program, which will go into next week. And there were only 2 attendance quizzes, so you're all set if you did both of them and you can head out. And then we'll be sharing Dr. Singh's contact information with you and his email if you'd like that. Someone asks, will we work on a project as part of this program? Yes. So you will be participating in a research symposium if you want to, it's not required. Essentially, our research symposium is where Tanuja, who's one of our executive interns, Tanuja, if you want to give everyone a little wave, and Alex, who's our co-director of research, they'll be working together on a prompt for our research symposium. It's essentially just a question asking you to solve a problem in the fields of medicine and STEM, usually combined, and you can tackle it a bunch of different ways. We give you a rubric, you'll be given a mentor if you want to, we'll help you find teammates, and you're given a couple of weeks to develop a solution, to make a presentation, and then at the end of those couple of weeks, sometime in mid-August, we'll have 1 day where everybody is given the chance to present their research symposium project if they want to. We'll be giving out speaker awards and then you can submit it and get category awards. So in the years previous to this one, we created a fake virus. And so students had to tackle this fake pandemic while a real pandemic was going on. And so some award categories we had were like engineering, biomedical, political, legal, things like that. The prompts are different every year, and we'll always be here to help you out if you need anything. And Alex will be hosting a workshop on how to actually get started with research this year on one of the off days of our program. We'll be sending out more details about that later. But yeah, just feel free to do that if you'd like to. And we will be here to help you. And then the EMT speaker's contact information. So he actually, he's an executive intern here at Medicine Empowered. So you can find him on Slack. Just type in his name and you can send him a message. I will send it in the chat. Yeah, so the volunteering hours. So if you take notes for us and you submit it, we'll have a form active for you closer to the end of the program. You can submit all of the notes that you've taken to us, and then we'll give you volunteer hours for that. You can also do the guest speaker thank you form. And then for participants in our international program, we're giving them the opportunity to translate into different languages for volunteer hours. And it's okay if you couldn't do the first poll, just message me on Slack and let me know that you can do it and I'll make an exception. Someone else asks, how do we know if you attended the program or not? So basically we know that you've attended the program by Zoom, which automatically tracks your attendance once you join, which is why we ask that you join with your full first and last name, because Zoom automatically tracks it. And then also by you responding to our polls for attendance. You're more than welcome to do the Google Form survey for work. Yes, you don't have to do it for our workshop speakers, but if you want to, I'm sure he would be happy to hear your thank yous. And yes, I can send the Google form again in the chat if someone else hasn't already, because it might have gotten lost. There are a lot of messages in there. So I just resent it again if you need that. No problem. And I think that's it. If you want to contact the speakers, we'll always provide you with their contact information if we're, of course, allowed to share that with you. But if you have any other questions, feel free to message me on Slack or message Ahmad or Thanuja. I try to get to everybody's questions at least a few times a day. I try to respond as fast as I can. But if you have any more questions, feel free to message us there. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions besides like, where's the quiz? And you guys can just work through the quiz at your own pace. So I'm going to go ahead and